Britain is placing a £10 billion bet on a single road. The Lower Thames Crossing is the most expensive gamble the UK has ever taken to fix its worst bottleneck, but there's a catch. Internal reports suggest this massive tunnel might actually make traffic worse. Today we're looking inside the project that could either save your commute or become the country's biggest infrastructure disaster. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly where your tax and toll money is going, why the opening has been pushed to 2034, and the scientific reason why building more roads often leads to more traffic. Before we bore deeper into the details of the Lower Thames Crossing, make sure to tunnel over and subscribe to Design Zip for the latest updates on mega projects from around the world. To understand why we're gambling £10 billion, imagine the M25 as the giant beating heart of the UK economy. Right now, it has a dangerously blocked artery at the Dartford crossing, the only road link across the Thames east of London. This new tunnel isn't just a bypass, it's a £10 billion double bypass surgery for the entire southeast. When the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge opened in 1991, it was supposed to be the final fix. But then came the explosion of online shopping, massive container port expansions, and a logistics boom in Kent and Essex. Today, a single broken-down lorry at Dartford can paralyse the entire M25, costing the UK economy millions in lost time every single day. Authorities tried workarounds. For example, they digitised the toll systems, made the traffic controls automatic, and improved lane management. But none of that improved the problem. There were just too many vehicles and one crossing with no alternative route. Over time, it became clear that Dartford's real weakness wasn't just congestion, but the lack of any fallback when something went wrong. That vulnerability made planners increasingly uneasy. By the late 2000s, studies began warning that Dartford was one of the weakest points in the national road network. In 2009, it was proposed that a new crossing be built further east. Not an expansion, something separate. Something that could actually pull traffic away instead of piling it higher. By the time the project finally received approval in 2025, Dartford had become a daily gamble. Britain could not afford to keep relying on a single overstretched crossing. That's why it was decided that the construction of the Lower Thames Crossing will begin in 2026. At the core of this project is a twin-bore tunnel beneath the Thames with parts sitting more than 60 metres below the surface. To give you an idea of the scale, each bore is wide enough to fit a two-storey house, and the amount of earth moved for this project could fill Wembley Stadium 5 times over. This isn't just digging a hole, it's an underground ballet. To save costs, engineers will use a single, massive tunnel boring machine. Once it finishes the first 2.6-mile stretch, they won't dismantle it. They will actually turn it around in a massive underground cavern and send it back the other way. It's a high-stakes manoeuvre that has rarely been attempted on this scale. But the tunnel is only the centrepiece. Around it, over 14 miles of new road will be built. In Essex, the route connects directly to the M25 between junctions 29 and 30 and links with the A13. In Kent, it ties into the A2 near the M2. These connections are important here because they allow long-distance traffic to bypass Dartford completely. Planning this layout took years. Earlier versions were scrapped. Junctions were removed. Routes were shifted west or east after public consultations. Entire sections were redesigned to avoid landfill sites, sensitive habitats, or unacceptable disruption. The total cost increased with every revision. Early estimates sat far lower, but by late 2025 the projected total had climbed past £10 billion. Around £1.2 billion have already been spent, and this is before the construction has begun. Most of this money was spent on planning, land acquisition, surveys and design work. Funding is split. The government is contributing several £billion up front, with private finance expected to cover the rest. The crossing will be tolled not just to manage traffic, but to repay construction costs over decades. That alone makes it one of the most financially complex road projects the UK has ever attempted. Construction is divided between major contractors. Balfour Beatty is handling roads north of the Thames. Another contractor is responsible for roads in Kent, and a joint venture between Bouygues and Murphy is tasked with tunnelling. The project is also setting new rules. No diesel machinery is allowed on site. Construction vehicles must be electric or hydrogen-powered. Prefabricated structures will reduce disruption. Not only that, 7 green bridges will cross the road to reconnect wildlife corridors. Another great thing is that 80% of the route will be hidden by landscaping rather than exposed concrete. Construction is scheduled to begin in 2026. If everything goes smoothly, and that's a big if, the crossing could open in the early 2030s. Current expectations have put the date around the year 2034. Now, for a project sold as essential, the Lower Thames Crossing has faced resistance at almost every stage. Let's start with emissions. Documents released after Freedom of Information requests show that construction alone is expected to produce around 2 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. That's before a single vehicle uses the tunnel. Over its lifetime, traffic using the crossing could add another 3.2 million tonnes. Environmental groups point out that this places the project among the highest emitting road schemes ever approved in the UK. The government counters this by calling it the greenest road ever built. They say that they are going to use electric construction vehicles or hydrogen-powered machinery only. There will be massive landscaping. But critics argue that cleaner construction does not cancel out what happens afterward. More road space almost always means more traffic. This is known as induced demand, and it has been documented repeatedly around the world. Critics argue that building more roads to fix traffic is like loosening your belt to cure obesity. It provides temporary relief, but eventually you just fill the space. In the United States, expanding the Katy Freeway in Texas to 26 lanes briefly reduced congestion. Within a few years, travel times were worse than before. In Los Angeles, freeway widening projects showed similar results. More capacity invited more driving. Opponents of the Lower Thames Crossing argue Britain is repeating the same mistake, just underground. Traffic modelling used by planners admits that while some vehicles will shift away from Dartford, total Thames crossings are expected to increase overall. That means more cars, more lorries, and more pressure on surrounding roads. Some studies even suggest the Dartford crossing could remain above capacity after the new tunnel opens. Then there is the environmental damage on land. The route passes close to or through areas containing ancient woodland, some of which have existed for hundreds of years. Groups like Woodland Trust argue that replanting trees elsewhere does not replace ecosystems that took centuries to form. Once ancient woodland is gone, it's gone. Wildlife organisations have raised similar alarms. The tunnel avoids surface damage under the river, but its portals and approach roads still reshape large sections of countryside. Residents in parts of Kent and Essex argue that they are absorbing disruption without receiving real benefits. Construction traffic, years of noise, reduced land value, and no guarantee that local congestion will improve. Some councils have formally opposed the route while admitting the project is likely unstoppable. Supporters point to economic gains. Groups tied to logistics and trade, including supporters connected to the Port of Dover, argue that congestion costs the economy billions every year, and that doing nothing is worse. But opponents counter with a bigger question. Why spend £10 billion on a road project at a time when many countries are shifting investment toward rail, public transport and demand reduction? France, Germany and the Netherlands are all scaling back major road expansion in favour of mixed transport systems. Even the EU has warned that road-heavy strategies clash with long-term climate targets. Then there is trust. Planning applications were withdrawn and resubmitted. Environmental data was delayed. Cost estimates changed repeatedly. Responsibility shifted from National Highways to the Department for Transport. To critics, this looks like a project being pushed through because too much has already been spent to stop. Campaign groups such as Greenpeace argue that the Lower Thames Crossing represents an old way of thinking. Build more roads, hope congestion disappears, deal with the consequences later. They warn that Britain risks locking itself into decades of higher traffic just as climate pressures intensify. And that's what makes the controversy so deep. This has to be taken seriously because this matter is about the kind of transport future the UK is choosing. The Lower Thames Crossing stands as a £10 billion commitment to Britain's infrastructure dilemma, a colossal engineering feat designed to unlock the nation's worst bottleneck while potentially inviting the very congestion it seeks to cure. It is a project caught between the urgent economic needs of today and the environmental responsibilities of tomorrow. Personally, I find it difficult to reconcile the sheer brilliance of the engineering with the outdated logic of the strategy. While the technical ambition of this tunnel is breathtaking, spending billions to expand road capacity in an era of climate crisis feels like applying an incredibly expensive bandage to a wound that requires a different kind of medicine entirely. but perhaps this is a gamble Britain simply has to take. Do you believe this tunnel is the visionary lifeline the UK economy needs? Or is it a £10 billion relic of a transport policy we should be moving past? If you appreciate deep dives into the architectural masterpieces, design challenges, and mega projects that are reshaping our world, I invite you to subscribe to Design Zip. There are many more stories buried beneath the surface, and I'd love for you to join us for the next one. Thank you for watching.